So it's Friday, it's you hangout time, and this week I'm joined by Shazwazza or Shannon. How you doing, Shannon?
Good. How about you, Warren?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, man. Very good, very good. As always, we kind of do some introductions, but you probably don't need much introductions. But for people who may not know who are you, Shannon?
I'm Shannon Deminick. I work for Umbraco HQ for the last, I don't know,
Seems
few
like forever
years.
now.
Yes, at least, I don't know, 4 years or something like that.
Yep.
Recently moved to Copenhagen a couple weeks ago.
So yeah, you're kind of this one of these persons who has kind of multiple identities. So you're Canadian that moved to Oz, and now what? So you're like a
Yeah.
Dane now?
We'll see how long we're here for. I don't know.
Yeah.
It depends if I can figure out the language.
You just got mumble.
It's never gonna happen. No.
So you're kind of one of the core kind of whiz kids who kind of works on the core day in, day out.
Yep. So I've been in Australia for 13 years, but I've been working on the core for Umbraco for a few. I'm kind of the only one on that side of the planet working for Umbraco, so it's kind of nice to work with real people once again.
It's like, yeah. Oh, hello, colleagues.
Yeah.
Yeah, that must be nice. So obviously you've been working in the core, but how did you even kind of get involved with Umbraco? There must have been a point before kind of
Yeah.
joining the HQ kind of as a role, but
So
you must
I
have kind of
used
come
to,
across it.
yeah, I used to work at a company called The Farm Digital in Sydney,
Hmm.
and this was back when maybe Umbraco 3 came out.
Yep.
And we started using it for one of our clients
Hmm.
because we were building Flash websites back in the day.
Oh yeah.
We did a nice CMS to spit out some XML, and
Hmm.
it seemed to do that job pretty well.
Yep.
So then we started using it, but it didn't have a lot of security features that we wanted. There was bugs and whatnot. So that was back when Git wasn't really around,
Yep.
and we had to make weird patches for. Oh, it wasn't even SVN then, and that was Team City, I think.
Ooh.
Yeah. So we started submitting some patches here and there,
Yep.
and just became involved. And then that was a long time ago. I think the HQ is tiny and the core team was super small. And Niels just asked me if I wanted to help out on the project and become part of the core, which I was pretty excited about. So of
Yeah.
course, yeah,
To working day in, day out on stuff that you love doing, and yeah,
yeah.
that's
And
awesome.
then everything kind of went from there. And I've just worked on the core for a very long time and love doing it.
Yeah, yeah. So we're going to talk about obviously CodeGarden. Obviously, if people who may have not gone, obviously the keynote's online, but there was obviously a lot of kind of new shiny things this year's keynote. So obviously there's 7.3 beta. Obviously we've got things like the REST API, identity, load balancing, and I'm sure there's loads more stuff in kind of 7.3 that's kind of either fixes or small features.
Yep.
Kind of, yeah. Where do we start?
Where do we
Where
start? I
do
don't
we
know.
start? Let's talk about the one that probably got me most interested was the REST API.
Yep. Okay.
Um,
Start there.
yeah. So first of all, maybe why create this REST API project? Because surely, obviously, we've got web API controllers that we can kind of us developers can just go, okay, I can create an API that talks to Umbraco
Yeah.
relatively easy. So how come this project about?
Well, I think it starts with targeting maybe not C# developers or
Hmm.
just app developers, front end developers to be able to consume Umbraco data.
Yep.
Currently, there's no real good way to do that without knowing how to write API controllers. The other thing is, we have the back office API controllers, which currently obviously power the back office,
Yep.
but those are very specific to the editors. They're not specific for, say, consuming generic data.
Yep.
So, yeah, the guys kind of asked me to start making prototypes and proof of concepts for it, and we went from there. So it's targeted at anyone that wants to consume Umbraco data without having to write C#.
Yeah. Okay. So, would it be a way or a way for like I say a front ender to go into the back office and pick and choose kind of what they would want in this API?
Yeah, I mean,
like a UI to kind of go, right, I want this part, I only want kind of, I'm working with content, but I only want this part of the content tree or this doc type or
it's a
whatever.
good idea. One day maybe we'll
Yeah,
get.
okay.
But right now, it's in a sort of a beta 1 phase.
Mm-hmm.
But what you could do as a front ender, as long as you know the root path to the REST service, you can call it. You'll get some data back. It will include all the URLs to consume even more data. So you'll be able to traverse the tree, walk up and down it, get the descendants, get the children, get the parents, do your queries, and get the data you want.
Yep.
Without actually knowing all of the URIs, just the base one.
Okay. So yeah, that's a good kind of segue, I suppose, into this is obviously you talking about these URIs. This is kind of the how specification, yes?
Yeah, so we went with HAL, which is HAL. If anyone wants to look it up, it's just a REST API specification. We didn't want to make our own REST API because there's a ton of them out there already, and we don't want to be reinventing the wheel.
Yep. Makes sense.
All these people that have made these specifications have done so in the correct manner, and it's a real specification. So they've put in a lot of work to write them, to make them standardized.
But I was going to say, why? Because there's tons out there. Why go with HAL?
Yeah, we did a few proof of concepts. Originally, Morton had made one using collection JSON, which is another specification. So we took his original proof of concept and then just extended on it, did a lot of research into it, and we ended up making something. But then when it came time to consume that data, even though it's a great spec and it works for what it's designed to do, consuming the data was quite convoluted because of how the data is structured. So we kind of had to go back to the drawing board to figure out, well, what kind of data do we want to return? And we just wanted to, make it simple to return simple JSON structures for people to consume. Yep. So we looked at other specs that can support that. We even made a proof of concept for OData, which is kind of a Microsoft spec, and it would be kind of convenient because we use Microsoft products or libraries. And they also offer a web API extension to make it. But when we started to make that proof of concept, we quickly realized that it was maybe far too complex a spec for our target audience. And it supports far more than we need. I mean, it can do all sorts of crazy, zany things, which a lot of it we do want, but a lot of it we don't want. And we don't want to say, we support OData, but only
a subset. Yeah, a subset of it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we looked at that. We made a proof of concept, and all these proof of concepts are actually committed to that REST API Git repository. So if you go back in history, you can go look at the collection JSON proof of concepts, OData ones. It's all still there if we want to ever dig it back out. And then, we looked at a few, but HAL seemed to be the one best suited for us because it was really simple, and it allows for traversing the Umbraco structures. So, the hierarchical ones. And like all REST APIs with the specs, they're discoverable. So you don't have to hard code your URLs. And that's with all REST API specs. But the HAL one just seemed to fit us the best.
Okay. Maybe it's worth, have you got an example floating around in a machine at all that we can...
I thought you said I didn't need to have it.
Damn it. Okay. Blame me. No. Okay. So, just maybe a kind of a brief overview because in the keynote it was kind of skimmed over quite quickly in terms of understanding what this HAL specification can do in terms of following these URIs and things like that.
Just gonna see if I have anything on this machine.
Surely you got a repo somewhere on your machine.
I just can't remember what I demoed.
It was Tunda app.
Yeah, but that's all pair stuff. Because all this stuff was on his machine that we demoed it from.
Okay.
Bum bum. I don't have anything.
No, it's fine. No worries. We'll move on.
Well, let's keep going on it anyway. So the REST API, we are supporting content currently in the version 1.
Yep.
Content, media, and members.
Mm-hmm. Isn't there relations as well?
What's that?
Relationships or relations?
Yeah, so there's a relations API in there as well, so to query them and create them. So for each one of those content media members, we support a full CRUD operation so that we can create, read, query, update, and delete.
Mm-hmm.
If you get the beta right now, you can do all those things with content and media. I think members is implemented too, but that's all really simple stuff.
Yep.
Where it becomes complex is with querying, and that's something that we haven't implemented yet. So right now we just have a basic way you can query with Lucene structures.
So is that like kind of a raw Lucene syntax?
Yeah, exactly. Because that was just a very quick way that we can get a rudimentary search in there. Okay. But moving forward, we've kind of written down a lot of ideas on different ways that we can query. And again, we don't want to rewrite something that might already exist. OData has its own query structure, which is a bit complicated, but we found a few other ones that we can do some trials on. I think one of them was called JSON path, which is kind of like XPath, but in JSON format, which would kind of fit with the Umbraco structure. And there's a few other ones. And actually, all of these tasks that we need to get done for the REST API are on the GitHub REST API repository on the issues. So people can have a look there if they're interested. But there's a lot of outstanding things. So like querying is one of them.
Yep.
And security is another one, which I guess could be a segue to identity.
Yeah. So obviously, I've been dabbling around with obviously the REST API early in the week, and first thing I come across was
one.
Yeah, lovely. So obviously, yeah, when you get REST API installed, you hit the endpoint, and the first thing you get is a 401 unauthorized.
Yep.
So is that by design, obviously, that these are supposed to be secure and things like that?
So the issue that you came across, I believe, is because you were using Postman to try to request that data.
Yep.
Now, Postman doesn't use your session cookies from your kind of browser instance.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say it did, and you had logged into the back office normally.
Yep.
It stores a cookie, and if that cookie data was going to be sent up with the Postman data, you would have authenticated and you would have got a response.
Okay.
However, with what you needed to do, you needed to sort of use an OAuth token.
Yep.
So with identity, so we have identity in the core. So when you log into the back office now with your user, it's actually using AspNet Identity to do all the authorization,
mm-hmm.
To create the cookie, and we've put a lot of code in there to make that happen. It's still backwards compatible with the Forms authentication cookie, and if people still want to use the old APIs, that still works. But we have another package called Identity Extensions.
Yep.
What that enables you to do is extend more easily the identity implementation we have in the back office. And one of those extension points is a very simple OAuth token server.
Yep.
So with what you were doing with Postman to get at the REST APIs, if you had requested a token from this token server, it would give you back a string, and then you can add that to your header on your request, and that will authenticate just the same way that it would authenticate with a cookie.
Yep.
For all the back office stuff. So.
Yeah, no, so yeah, it took me a little while to figure out, but so yeah, like you said, .NET Identity. Was it always planned to move kind of away from a custom membership provider, so to speak, and look at
the membership stuff in AspNet is kind of obsolete. It's been like that for quite some time. I mean, obviously the code's still there and it works, but authentication's come a long way since those were created. I mean, the membership providers were made, I don't know, 10 years ago. They're old. So we still support them. So at 7.3, we're making the move to start with, to move to AspNet Identity, which is fully extensible. So you can do a lot more things than just the membership providers allowed you to do. You can plug into the whole authentication pipeline. You can add third-party OAuth providers, so you could log in with Google provider, Microsoft provider, Facebook provider. You can create your own provider, Active Directory ones, etc., etc. So I mean, it's a great step to move forward. And maybe in V8, we still unsure of whether we keep membership providers in there. Probably will, just for backwards compatibility. But everyone should probably start moving to AspNet Identity. So with 7.3, we've got that in there for just back office users.
Okay.
Not members. And the story behind that is that we haven't figured out how to invent more time in the day.
Fair enough.
And so there's another package I made, I think it was late last year, called Umbraco Identity, which you can install separately. And that's actually AspNet Identity for members, so the front end.
Okay.
And
so it's possible to do then?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the core in 7.3, we ship with user support for identity. Then if you need front-end member support, you can install the other package, which is on my GitHub repository. And we've tested that they both work side by side seamlessly. So awesome. That works. Moving forward, probably 7.4 or 8 or whatever the next version is going to be, that has yet to be decided because we need to make a roadmap or actually write up the roadmap. We'll integrate that membership stuff back into the core.
Okay, nice. So that's kind of leads me slightly on to the next question, is that this identity and this REST API is kind of separate NuGet packages currently. Is any kind of reasoning behind that, and why is it not just part of the 7.3 beta in the core?
Yeah. So every time we do a release of the core, I mean, there's a ton of testing involved because there's a lot of things in the core, of course. So even if we say we wanted to make a release for one specific thing, we need to test everything. We need to run all the unit tests. That's easy. Then we need to retest all the back office, the front end, security. So there's quite a bit of overhead with releasing a core update. By the way, your video stopped working on my screen.
Okay. I
don't know if that's just me.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it's frozen.
All right, cool.
you just have to look at the weird frozen face.
So yeah, with all that testing, it's hard to do releases just to fix one tiny thing. So what we are going to do with the REST API and the identity extensions package is release them out of band. What that means is that they will both start on a version 1.0, and they can be installed by NuGet, and they will target 7.3 and above. And that allows us to say, well, if we need to fix something in the REST API, or if we need to just add one more feature to the REST API, oh, you're back. Then we can obviously just test that one package and release it separately, which it's easier for us to do releases, and it means that you guys can get the releases probably more frequently, or when you require just that one component to be updated.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft have been moving in this direction for quite a while now.
So I suppose similar to kind of the next pattern in terms of that everything is NuGet, isolated.
Exactly. I mean, even if you look back a few years, you can install MVC separately, and that's what everyone does. MVC is a NuGet package. Web API is a NuGet package. Exactly. Identity is a NuGet package. All these things are out-of-band releases from the core of .NET.
Yeah.
So it's a similar, well, it's not a similar concept. It's exactly the same concept as that. In the future, maybe we might integrate some of these out-of-band releases into the core, but we'll just see how things go.
No, I think it's a smart move.
Yeah, it's easy for everyone to test and release and consume.
Yeah. So with .NET Identity, I know I've been kind of bugging you earlier in the week. I think it was even yesterday, talking about two-factor auth. Obviously, there's kind of a lot of tutorials in the .NET Identity in terms of using kind of local two-factor auth. I know in the keynote you demoed Neil's demoed kind of authenticating with Google, but say I have a client who doesn't use Google, doesn't use Microsoft, doesn't use Active Directory or any of these kind of third-party providers, and I want to implement local kind of two-factor auth and want to send, I don't know, an SMS via Twilio or whatever. Is it doable?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent. I've never gone through the whole process of trying it in the core. So there's three kind of big parts to that. One is that the database tables required to do the kind of two-factor authentication tracking is not being shipped in the core. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It depends on your SMS provider or how it all works. Maybe they'll require you to store some different data. Who knows? So you can obviously make your own database tables and link that to ours. That's a pretty simple thing to do, obviously as a C# coder. Then with AspNet Identity, as I mentioned before, it's really flexible and extensible. So when you install the Identity Extensions package, you get some code snippets where you can replace the startup. And one of the ones that you saw, there's two. There's the standard startup, and then there's the custom startup. In the custom startup, it allows you to basically replace what's called the user store and user manager, which is a part of the AspNet Identity. Once you just override ours, and then implement the two-factor auth parts of it, which is just
interface,
so that's the one part. You can extend it that way in the C# code and the database code on your own, and then you can replace that at startup. The second part of it, as you mentioned, is the UI. Now there is plans to be able to tweak the login UI. One of them will be if you install some third-party auth plugins like Google or your own button, maybe some clients will actually want to remove the login fields entirely and only have the buttons. So you can't log in locally. So we're exploring how we enable that, if it's a config option or something different. But then with the two-factor auth, even if you logged in locally and you had your own...
you need text box to go enter the 6-digit code from, I don't know, your SMS or, I don't know, your Google Authentication app.
So that's going to be the tricky part, which I can't very well say is currently possible with the 7.3 beta that's out there. Because what's going to be required with that is we have our normal login. So you would log in. It would go to our authentication service. It would check if you're logged in. And based on your user manager, it should return whether you require a two-factor auth.
And if you do,
currently we don't handle that. So we need to handle that and then probably redirect to
a new UI.
A new UI. So it'll be your own custom UI or a custom route. And then you'd be able to plug in whatever forms that you want, because your form's always going to be custom. We can't really...
No, I totally understand that.
It's going to work for everyone. But that's the part that's not currently implemented, which, we'll just work with you because you're the first person that wants it. So
I think it'd be nice to just hack around with it.
But of course, we want to ship a product where you can plug in all these cool, fun things and support it. So,
good stuff. So we talked about REST API. We talked about identity. Next thing, big thing, come away from the keynote or in the conference in general is load balancing. And that's kind of probably your pet project or baby, really.
So in my presentation, I'm not sure if that's up yet, but if people are interested in load balancing, they should watch that when it comes online. But it's not a main reason for it. Load balancing is just complicated.
Yeah,
no matter which way you cut it.
It's not just click a button and there you go. It's like load balanced. It just doesn't work like that.
And it shouldn't be in a way.
In an ideal world, yeah.
Yeah, what we don't want to end up have happening is, just a developer who goes to a client and says, yeah, we can install load balancing on your site. And they don't really know what the repercussions are for that. Because what's going to happen is people will start load balancing sites that probably don't need to be load balanced, and they're going to put a lot of complexities into their site that don't need to be there. So everyone needs to know that load balancing is difficult, but we're going to make it much more easy in 7.3. But people should still realize the implications of doing so.
Yeah, no, of course.
So the other thing is it's probably roughly 35% of our support tickets are to do with load balancing, which is very high.
Yeah, that's that's insane.
And that's because it's so complicated and everyone seems to implement it differently. There's a lot of variables and moving parts there. So to track down any issues people are having, it's a lot of information that needs to be given up, and then we need to try to replicate it. So what we're going to do is try to simplify that. The other problem with load balancing is a lot of people are moving to Azure websites or wanting to move to Azure websites, and there's
something that is more kind of a hosted or managed service to take away this pain in terms of scaling and load balancing.
Yeah, scaling is the big one. So auto scaling or manual scaling. Currently, if you wanted to do scaling in your own environment, you have to know what the server is. You have to bring the server online. You have to test it. Then you have to go update your configuration for Umbraco to tell it that there's a new server involved in it. You have to update your load balancer to then start giving requests to that server.
Yeah, making sure they can talk to each other, networking.
Yeah, there's a lot involved with that. And if you wanted to set up auto scaling with your own environment, that's not supported out of the box for Umbraco. You can make it work by some interfaces that we give you, but it's not an easy thing.
Okay.
And then with Azure websites, because of the nature of how it's put together, Umbraco doesn't really like it all that much. But again, you can make it work if you know the kind of ins and outs of Umbraco and configuration and really know how Azure websites is structured. But what we want to get done is that we just support all environments out of the box. So currently the way that load balancing works is, the biggest problem with load balancing is the cache that Umbraco stores. So there's our file-based cache, which is like the umbraco.config file. There's also in-memory cache, and all that cache needs to be in sync.
So you could hit a server that's ever so slightly behind because that cache file on that server is not up to date with the server over here.
Yeah, and it's not a problem with latency. I mean, if the cache file takes 2 seconds to update on server B from server A, that's fine. It doesn't matter. But what the big problem is if the server B never gets updated. And that might be based on a web service call failing or some DNS problem, all sorts of things, right? Another issue is that if you take down...
Someone just...
breaking down the door. If you, say, take down server B and then bring it back online, say, a day later, it's going to be out of date. It's going to be stale, and there's no way to really make it come back up to date without knowing what you're doing, like deleting all the indexes and deleting the Umbraco config so that it rebuilds itself. And then there's performance issues with that as well. So what we want to do is, instead of servers having to talk to each other to update the cache.
Yep.
Every server will work autonomously. So it doesn't care what servers are in your cluster at all. You can bring a server online, take it offline, add 10, remove 5, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
All the servers need to know about is that they exist and that they're giving requests.
So how will this model work from the kind of the current model that we have in terms of the servers kind of pushing or letting each other know that stuff's going on?
And that's the exact term that you just mentioned. So currently we have sort of a push cache replication, and we're going to change that. Well, I mean, it's going to be an option. We're going to change that to a pull cache replication. So instead of having servers talk directly to each other, servers just talk to a database. And we already have a database, so that makes sense.
Yep.
So there's a central database, and servers just ask it for instructions. Now, the clever thing about this is that we have our master server, which we have in load balancing.
Yep.
And when you publish something, it's going to send messages to all the other servers. So what we've done is taken that same exact message, serialized it to JSON, and then we store it in the database table. So the database table becomes a queue.
Yep. Okay.
Then, server B and server C, server D, when they receive requests, they have a throttled timer. So let's say every 5 second or maximum 5-second delay, it's going to go to the database and say, do I have outstanding instructions I haven't processed? Oh, I do. So it's going to get the queue of messages. Mm-hmm. And the cool part is that those messages are the exact same messages that they would have received from the master server via a web service call.
Okay, so it sounds like you haven't had to do too much kind of reinventing the wheel because you're still sending the same message.
Yep.
Just get it in a different way.
Absolutely correct. Yep, that's exactly how it works. The cool part about this is that because it's a queue of messages, is if you take a server offline for a day or a week or a month, when you bring it back online, it will just reprocess the messages that it missed, and it becomes right up to date again.
Okay, so that queue, could it potentially, or that database table, could that potentially get quite bloated over time in terms of?
Yeah, absolutely. So for this, we have some options that you can specify when you set it up. Mm-hmm. And those options contain things like, maximum days to keep instructions. Okay. So I think by default it's 120 days or something like that.
Okay. So if a server's off for 120 days, then...
Well, there's two options for that. So there's how many days to truncate the messages in that table. Mm-hmm. So when a server comes online, it'll say, right, I got my messages, truncate everything that's 120 days old. Wow. So we only keep the latest 120 days. On that same note, you can specify in the options, if a server comes online and it hasn't talked to the database for 100 days, mm-hmm. don't reprocess all the messages, because that might actually be quite intensive to do. Yep. And it would actually be faster to just rebuild my caches from the database directly.
Okay. Yep.
So those are two options.
No, makes perfect sense.
But it's really great. So with that idea, you can now have Azure websites and do auto-scaling or manual scaling just with...
So I can go into Azure sites and I can grab the slider and,
yep.
I don't know, give it 4 instances or whatever it is.
Yep, absolutely.
So what's the issue in terms of auto-scaling then? Why, for what reason can I Azure site say, I don't know, I've hit certain amount of network traffic, throw another server into the mix? What's the complexity?
You can't do that now because of the way that push cache replication works. Mm-hmm. With Azure websites, if you even manually scale with the slider or auto scale, those servers or workers that come online, there is a way for us to know the name of them, but it's not very seamless.
Okay.
And because servers would need to talk to each other directly, there's all sorts of problems that come into play when you try to do that. But with this new pull cache replication, if you have Azure websites auto-scaling and you have that enabled, of course, when a server comes online, it comes online just as if you manually scaled it, and it would get up to date with the database. So with 7.3, autoscaling should just work with Azure websites as long as you set it up correctly. So we obviously need to document a few things, but that's way easier to do than it was before.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So even if you had your own environment, I mean, I'm not sure how AWS autoscales. I'm sure there's all sorts of different things that you can implement to make that happen. But whether it's on AWS or Azure websites or on your own environment, scaling will just work as if this is implemented, because a server doesn't need to know about another server. It's just autonomous.
That's really nice. And yeah, so how long has that been kind of in the works?
Long time.
Long time.
To be honest, I'm not really sure. I'm gonna estimate like a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just kind of been one of those little Freedom Friday projects a long time ago. I wonder if this would work, and it evolved kind of quickly from there, and then it was put on the back burners for a while, and then we've decided, well, we should actually make this happen because more and more people are doing load balancing, and more support requests are coming in, and everyone seems to still do it totally different from everyone else.
Yeah. Okay.
Hopefully this will solve a lot of headaches.
A ton of problems by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
For everyone, you guys and us using it as well.
Yeah, you'll just know how to configure it, and it should just work.
Awesome. So they're kind of the three big things that kind of was mentioned in the keynote. But I'm sure there's tons more stuff in 7.3 beta. Is there anything that you can kind of pinpoint and put your finger on in terms of either fixes or tiny features that are coming? Or
I'm just gonna share my screen to see if this works. Share screen. My screen?
I certainly can.
Okay, so this is the 7.3 sort of Kanban board that we use internally. And there's a lot of stuff fixed here. So, the one major thing is that the entire services layer is complete. So that means that from 7.3 onwards, people should definitely not use any legacy APIs. So if people are still using APIs from outside of the Umbraco or Umbraco.core DLL,
they should be using stuff from Business Logic, DLL, the CMS DLL.
Exactly. So you'll be able to remove that. Until 7.3, you couldn't. So things like public access and all sorts of things were not possible to use with the new services APIs, but now they are.
Okay.
So that's a really big step in the right direction and kind of a stepping stone for version 8. Version 8 will be a very tidy, cleaned up solution, and hopefully we'll only be shipping with 3 DLLs, maybe 4, which will be great. So in order to get there, we needed to do this. A few other things. So public access has always been a bit of a nightmare, especially with load balancing, because it was stored in an XML file.
On disk.
So that's all moved into a database table, which is good. And again, when you upgrade, all the migration stuff will take care of that for you. We have style sheets are no longer in the database at all.
That's the big thing for me for a long time.
I know people have. Well, even in the core team, we've talked about removing templates from the database. Unfortunately, that's not going to be possible. I'm
curious to know why.
I'll tell you why. Well, people like to have templates in a nice name, right? So it could be home space page.
So some kind of friendly alias or name.
Exactly. If you stored it as a file, that's not possible.
Yeah, you're going to get some ugly, I don't know, whatever.
The other reason is when we do migrations properly, when we do it properly soon, with GUIDs, when we need to know if a template's changed. And if it's only a file, we would never know if it's changed. So tracking migrations between environments, they need to be in a database table. So it was a tough decision because I also didn't like them in a database table, but the way migrations work and how they need to work and naming, kind of have no choice.
Okay.
Let's see, what else?
So you're talking about the service API layer.
Yeah.
I can't remember which API used to, or I don't know if it still is. It was either media or members was quite chatty to the database. I can't remember which one it was. Maybe it might be media off the top of my head. It's been a while. It would talk to the database.
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Well, like all the service APIs, the new ones. Well, so all the old ones now wrap the new ones as well.
Okay, so
really,
even if I was stupid enough to still using the old ones,
yeah, it's actually going to be calling the new ones underlying for the most part.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is performance optimized. There might be some things that, I mean, it's definitely way better than it ever has been, put it that way. There's still more optimization that we could do for a few things. The other big one is Web API 2 is being shipped with 7.3.
So does that mean I can use the root attributes and start chucking my own roots in?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. Whatever you want to do with Web API 2, you can do. One really cool thing to note on that is that the REST API uses root attributes.
Yep.
But what's cool about it is that Microsoft out of the box don't let you say, I want to have route attributes applied to only certain things and not others. It's either it's on or it's off.
Okay.
And what we didn't want to do is interfere with how people work with their own Web API controllers. So it's a blog post I need to write up. I don't think I'll have time today, maybe next week. But it's how we implemented route attributes in kind of a secluded fashion. So it doesn't interfere with other route attributing, and you can enable it just for specific controllers.
Okay, nice.
So I think it would be actually a great blog post and also a package, because I think a lot of people might want that.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, that's another cool thing. So Web API 2 is in there. MVC 4 is still in there. We're not upgrading to MVC 5 for this release because it's too much of a breaking change. It's also worth noting 7.3 has a few little breaking changes. Some would argue Web API 2 is a breaking change, but it should really only break a very few amount of installs. But we'll be documenting all of that.
Okay. Yep.
Unit testability. That's a big one.
Yeah, it's huge.
With the REST API, if you have a look at the code base for that, it's just a test project and the class library project. It actually isn't referencing or having a website to test on. The entire REST API is unit tested using OWIN self-hosting.
Okay.
And it's all using mocks. So all of the services that it uses, the application context, the Umbraco helper methods, everything that you use inside of a controller is all mocked and unit tested that way. So 7.3 has come a long, long way.
So I presume with that being the case in terms of the REST API project, those tests have kind of fallen back into the core. Or in terms of being objects being mocked or being able to be mocked and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So with building the REST API, we wanted to make sure that all of that was possible. And in doing so, kind of led us down a path of what we needed to update in 7.3. Quite a good process to go through. There are still a few things in 7.3 that aren't mockable, like some of the extension methods that require singleton access, but we need to just update all of those methods to accept the services that they're using, and if people use those ones, then they'll be able to unit test their own code. But for the most part, it's all unit testable, and if people come across things that aren't that way, then we just need to log some issues and we'll make it happen.
Awesome.
But it's leaps and bounds better than it was before. And the original idea was to release a kind of unit tester helper DLL.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to do that anymore, just because made
Better to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Exactly. What else can I tell you? So AspNet Identity is obviously in there. Latest TinyMCE version. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
There's actually a lot of UI fixes as far as sort of editing on mobile.
Okay.
On tablets, and that's thanks to tons of pull requests we've received for that. So if you shrink the screen down in the back office, the tabs will now drop down and they won't overlay with each other. The buttons are all clickable. It looks much nicer. The grid still doesn't quite work on a tiny tablet or mobile phone. That's a different problem. Yep. But for the most part, the rest of it much nicer.
Okay. Yeah, very, very nice.
Another big one, so the grid used to store configuration values with the value, if that makes sense.
Yep.
It doesn't do that anymore because it shouldn't. So if you went to change some grid configuration, that would have never been reflected on your front end. So now it does.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Loosely.
Okay. Well, before it wasn't possible, but now it's possible.
That sounds good then.
Let's see. That's kind of it for
it's some nice stuff in
there. It's a really big release, so people should start installing the beta, helping us test if possible.
Yep.
Was my screen being shared there?
Yes, it is.
Oh yeah. Stop sharing. There you go.
There we go. Cool. Yeah. So. It's come on leaps and bounds. So I suppose before we kind of wrap up, maybe let's briefly talk about where the core is going in kind of I suppose V8 is probably the big topic. You're talking about a lot of breaking changes. Is this the big release that in terms of try and drop as much legacy stuff as possible?
Yeah. So I don't know if this still exists. One sec.
Because obviously you mentioned talking about only shipping kind of 3 or maybe even 4 DLLs. Is the database schema going to get a tidy up? It sounds like from what I hear, it's going to be kind of a bit of a clean up and a bit of a tidy up.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just trying to find. We've documented this somewhere, and it's been around for quite a while, but it was always the goal, and the goal was that we would ship with 3 DLLs instead of all these legacy DLLs that we're currently shipping with. Yep. So that would be Umbraco.core, the Umbraco.web project, which is just Umbraco.dll, and the Umbraco.web.ui, and that would be the entire core. So that's the dream. It's been the dream and documented for, I think, 4 years, 3 years. And V8, hopefully if we have enough time, we'll reach that goal.
Okay, that'd be nice. So this is where you draw the line in the sand and go, look, there's only so much legacy support we can do. And
yeah, and that's why 7.3 is kind of a good stepping stone with the whole services layer and APIs available. Mm-hmm. If people start migrating all their code to those services, then going to V8 will be a lot less painful. Yeah. And V8's not break everything; it's just removing legacy.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to break everything in V8 at all. It's just removing all that legacy code. There'll be some other new features like Le Cache Nouveau.
Le Cache Nouveau, yeah. I like that name.
Yeah. That's probably one of the main features there. Obviously, MVC 5 or the latest MVC. Yep. All of the latest versions will be in V8. So those will be breaking changes, but they're required. Yep. Things like Examine version 2 with Lucene 3, or the latest Lucene that will be out by the time we ship. Those are breaking changes, but those are breaking changes just due to major version updates for our libraries. And the other big one is just cutting off all the legacy and only maintaining a new and healthy code base. So if people upgrade from 7.3 onwards to the new services layer and don't use things like library for all the old stuff,
Yeah.
then upgrading should be a lot nicer.
Very, very nice. What was I going to actually say? Totally forgotten. But in the meantime, Kevin Jump has asked, is the latest release on Nightly, that's May the 26th? I presume not.
No.
That sounds quite a while ago.
I guess everyone's just been super busy with Hour and CodeGarden and everything that we've probably neglected looking at getting the 7.3 nightlies out. The other thing that we've just changed only last week, I think I tweeted, or this week, is that the 7.3 branch, which used to be its own branch, is now the Dev v7 branch.
Okay.
So that's just the primary development branch. So yeah, after this, I'll go look at the nightlies and make sure that they start running either today or Monday so people can get their hands on it.
Cool. That was another thing, talking about V8 and simplifying. Is the solution going to be not as insane to kind of a newcomer? I want to make a tiny improvement to the code base, and I want to make a pull request. The current solution is kind of pretty insane, and it's pretty hard to know what project to look in. So there's like Umbraco Core, Umbraco Business Logic, Umbraco Web, Umbraco Web UI.
Yeah. So I'll just screen share again. All right, can you see my solution explorer there?
Yep.
So with Umbraco 8,
Yep.
in theory, this will be gone.
Cool.
This will be gone. This will be gone. This will be gone.
So that's
this will
4,
be gone.
5,
this,
6,
this,
7,
this,
8,
this,
9.
Those
Straight
will
away.
all be gone.
Awesome. Yeah.
If you look at the, hang on, I'll actually open it. One sec. I'll show you how far we've gotten so far.
So is this kind of your attempt in terms of kind of cleaning up, so to speak?
Yeah, so like the legacy code is just strung throughout the code base so bad that when you make one change, it takes quite a while to change everything.
Okay.
So once that's done, it just means that updating the core and fixing the core becomes much faster over and over again. So
Yeah, no, totally.
just show you the difference here. So there's our current V8 solution.
Yeah.
It's my computer.
I think your fan is going nuts.
Yeah, it is. And that's that's V7.3.
Yep.
15 projects. So we've already got rid of 3 projects in
Nice.
V8. So it's a good start, and we'll get through it slowly but surely.
Good stuff.
It's actually a very exciting thing to work on, just deleting old stuff.
Deleting old stuff. Deleting Niels' code, yeah?
I guess, yeah.
Awesome. Let's just check there's no more questions. Doesn't seem like it, but I'm sure if anyone's got any questions, they can either grab you on Twitter, post issues when testing 7.3 beta on the issue tracker,
Yep.
or I don't know, on GitHub or wherever.
Yep.
Yep to all of
I'll
that.
be contactable.
Yeah.
And I now live in the same time zone as most people. So.
Yeah, which is awesome. Seems like that's going to make a massive improvement to the project in general for you being kind of with the rest of the gang in terms of getting collaboration and kind of...
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting year.
Good stuff. I look forward to it, mate, and good catching up with you, and I'll speak to you very, very soon.
Cool.
Excellent.
Cheers.
Cheers. Speak to you soon, buddy.
All right.